Good morning, students. In our last class, we have finished up till control of respiration. That is, we have seen the nervous and chemical control of respiration. Now, today we will be studying about respiratory disorders. Okay, so respiratory disorders are basically classified into three categories. First is infectious respiratory disorders. Second is tumor or lung cancer. Third is obstructive respiratory disorders. Out of which this obstructive respiratory disorders have many subtypes, but these infectious and tumor one is short one. So we are starting with infectious respiratory disorders. What does infectious respiratory disorders mean? Infectious means caused by some pathogen. Okay, and what are pathogens? All the disease causing microorganisms are known as pathogens. So if any respiratory disease is caused due to pathogen, will come under this category, that is infectious respiratory disorders. The examples of infectious respiratory disorders are TB, pertussis, pneumonia and diphtheria. Like, for example, TB is caused by a bacteria named Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Pneumonia is caused by again a bacterium, that is Streptococcus pneumoniae. So these are, since these diseases are caused by certain bacteria or virus or protozoa or any microorganism it can be. So if it is caused by due to any infectious microorganism, so it will come under infectious respiratory disorders. Remember these four examples. Now, next type of respiratory disorder is tumor or lung cancer. These tumors or lung cancers are caused due to carcinogen. Now, what are carcinogens? Cancer causing substances are known as carcinogen. Now, the most common carcinogen which causes tumors or lung cancer or any respiratory disorder is benzpyrene. Benzpyrene is a carcinogen, means a cancer causing agent which is present in this cigarettes, then all these smoking things. So it is present in these things like BD cigarette. So in all those things, this benzpyrene is present, basically tobacco. In tobacco smoking, in tobacco, with the tobacco, this, or we can say the tobacco contains this carcinogen. Okay, the tobacco contains, that is tobacco is what? Tambaku. Tobacco contains the carcinogen, that is benzpyrene, and tobacco is consumed in any form, in the form of BD cigarette or any other form. So the person consuming tobacco in any form is in a high risk of this tumor or lung cancer. Basically what happens when a person smokes, so this benzpyrene gets into his respiratory system and gradually it triggers certain cells to multiply without any control. In an uncontrolled manner, it triggers certain cells to divide rapidly, and due to that uncontrolled division of cells, it leads to the formation of tumors, and tumors ultimately convert into lung cancer if not taken care of at a lower levels, at the previous levels only, at the initial levels. So this is what is the second cause of respiratory disorder, means second type of respiratory disorder is tumor or lung cancer, which is caused by carcinogens. And then third type of respiratory disorder is obstructive respiratory disorder. Obstructive respiratory disorders includes diseases like allergies, asthma, emphysema. So these all certain diseases are there related to respiratory disorders which are kept under the third category, that is obstructive respiratory disorders, out of which we will be studying about the first type of obstructive respiratory disorder, that is allergies, in little bit detail, and about rest of the obstructive respiratory disorders we'll be studying in very short. Fine. So the first one is allergies. What is allergy? It is hypersensitivity of a person to an allergen. Hypersensitivity means, hyper means too much. The word hyper means too much. So when a person is too much sensitive to any particular allergen. Now allergens can be what? It can be dust, pollens, or food. Like there are certain person who are allergic to dust. See, even if when dusting takes place in our home, we may slightly sneeze sometime, but there are certain person who are allergic to dust. Even with very slight amount of dust, they'll sneeze continuously. They'll have certain swelling on some part of the body. The nose will swell, they'll have running nose. Then watery eyes means their condition will become very worse. They'll sneeze, and these all things may happen. So some are dust allergic, some are allergic to pollen grains, whereas some are allergic to certain type of food. Like some have protein allergy, like they cannot consume any item made up of protein, like no non-veg items like fish, egg, meat, because it contains high amount of protein, as well as no dal, no milk, paneer, cheese. All the protein items are strictly prohibited for them, because the moment they consume anything of protein, their body starts reacting in a very unusual manner, and that is what is quite difficult for the person to bear. So that's why that is what is high. These are all allergens. So remember, dust, pollens, any type of food can be allergen. Anything can be, even sun can be an allergen from some person. Like some people are there who, when they move out in sun, they have certain rashes, red rashes on their body, or they have certain small spots, or we can say like pimples, very small pimples sort of things on their entire body. So that is all what is hypersensitivity. So hypersensitivity of a person to any allergen, and that allergen can be the dust, pollen, a type of food, or sunlight. It can be anything. So overreacting of our body, or for a body to be hypersensitive, or hypersensitivity of a person to any allergen is known as allergies. Now this allergies, that starting from an allergen entering our body up till its effect, are divided into 3 steps. The first step of allergy is stimulation by an allergen. It is the first step, and this step is also known as sensitization. Stimulation by an allergen. Like what happens? Any allergen acts like an antigen for our body. Now what is an antigen? Antigen is any foreign substance. Like any microorganism can act as allergen for our body. Anything which is coming from outside, which was not present in our body, and it is coming from outside, act as antigens. So this allergen is coming from outside, so it acts as antigen. So allergen basically produces, when an allergen enters our body, in response to that our body produces antibodies. Like for example, these antibodies act as soldiers of our body. What happens when any person from any other country enters our country without any visa, passport, or without any proper evidence proof? What happens? Our soldiers, they become immediately, the police staff, soldiers, they become alert, like this person has entered our country without any valid proof. So we need to either kill that person, or we need to keep that person under strict watch. So this is what is done by the antibodies. Our antibodies acts as the soldiers of our body. They protect our body. Now when any allergen enters our body immediately start producing lot of antibodies. Like now you must have studied or heard in the news that China is it has already attacked once and now it is again in a mood to attack. So it has already aligned lot of soldiers near that Arunachal Pradesh and their borders. So what our country is doing in response to that? Our country, on knowing that, our country has also sent lot of soldiers to that region, so that if any of the soldier from China, Chinese soldier enter our country or attack on our country, our soldiers are also equally prepared to fight with those soldiers. So that is what is happening. So in our body as well, as soon as any allergen enters our body produces antibodies against that allergen to fight against that allergen, to kill that allergen, or to inactivate to make that allergen inactive. So what do these, and as soon as the antibodies are produced, these antibodies bind to the mast cells. This circular one is the mast cell, and the antibodies, see, antibodies are what? They are Y-shaped structure, and they attach to the mast cells. This is what is the first step of allergy, that is sensitization, stimulation by an allergen. That is, as soon as the allergen enters our body immediately produces a lot of antibodies, and those antibodies bind to the mast cells. Now, the second step is second stimulation. In this second step, what happens? The allergen binds to the mast cells which are stimulated or attached with antibodies. Now, see, this was in the sensitization step, the antibodies got attached to the or got bind to the mast cells. Now, in the second step, the allergen will bind to these antibodies. Okay, as you can see, this allergens I have shown with red dot, antibodies are shown with Y shape, and mast cell is a circular structure. So these, in the first step, these antibodies were already bound to the mast cells, and now along with that, these allergens also get attached to the antibodies. Okay, and as soon as the allergens get attached to the antibodies, the mast cells break down, they rupture, they break open. And what is present inside the mast cell? It is a chemical compound, that is histamine. So as soon as the allergen binds to the antibodies attached to the mast cell gets ruptured and releases histamine. And what is the role of histamine? Histamine causes, and as soon as the histamine is released, the third step is histamine action. That is, as soon as the histamine is released, it shows all these symptoms. That is, there will be inflammation, swelling at some place, there will be running nose, means continuous water will come out from our nose, then the eyes will become teary, it will appear that the person is crying, that is, the eyes will be all watery, as well as continuous sneezing will start taking place. So these are all the symptoms which we can see when histamine is released and mixes with our blood. Histamine is released from the mast cell, and this histamine mixes with the blood. By looking at all these symptoms, we can understand that yes, this person is allergic to something, and then we can find out that that person is allergic to exactly what. So, and it's very easy to find out. So that is what this allergies basically take place in 3 steps. Allergic reactions, first is sensitization, that is stimulation by an allergen. Second step is second stimulation, that is when allergen binds to mast cells which are attached with antibodies, and as a result of which the mast cells rupture and histamine is released. And the third step is histamine action, means the histamine produces the symptoms which are an indication that yes, some allergic reaction has taken place in the body. Now what is the treatment? Since it is histamine is the main reason which is causing all these infections, all these symptoms, which is showing all these symptoms. So if we need to reduce these symptoms, then we need to take antihistamine drugs. Okay, these are drugs we are seeing, but these drugs are what? These drugs are not the normal drugs, that is which was being consumed in Urta Punjab. These are the drugs which are medicated drugs. Okay, so which are very much licensed, and it is produced for medication purposes only, and these are absolutely legal to use. So these are antihistamine drugs which when consumed reduces all these symptoms, and the person feels comparatively better. So then the next type of allergen, or we can say, if the allergen is pollen grains, so allergy caused due to pollen grains is also known as hay fever. Okay, so now further we'll see the rest of the obstructive respiratory disorders. Okay, so second type of obstructive respiratory disorder is asthma. In asthma, what happens? There is bronchial spasm. Means our bronchioles, they reduce and they shrink. The lumen of the bronchiole, they reduce. Basically, the bronchiole shrink, and when the bronchiole shrink, what happens? And that shrinking of bronchiole is known as bronchial spasm. And what happens? That is actually the lumen of bronchi decreases. When the lumen means inner space of bronchi. That inner space of bronchi decreases, and the sputum is small. What is sputum? Basically, it is our saliva. Saliva is also known as the sputum. So sputum is more, as well as due to this bronchial spasm or decreasing of the lumen of bronchi, the person feels difficulty in breathing. He has heavy breathing, means he breathes longer, means he takes deep breaths because he is unable to breathe properly because his bronchi have reduced, it has got shrunk. So that's why the person takes deep breath. So this is what is asthma. The third type of obstructive respiratory disorder is bronchitis. In this also there is wheezing, as well as there is heavy breathing. Again, heavy breathing just as like asthma, but there is no or negligible sputum. The next fourth type of obstructive respiratory disorder is emphysema. In this, there is reduction in alveolar respiratory surface. Okay, so ultimately asthma as bronchitis is related to the bronchiole, that is reduction in size of bronchiole, whereas the emphysema is related with the reduction in alveolar respiratory surface, and this happens due to tobacco smoking. That is, in smokers it happens mostly. That is what happens. This is our alveoli. It is lined by alveolar epithelium on the inner side, and when a person smokes tobacco, consumes tobacco, then what happens? This tobacco basically creates certain fluids, certain things which gets deposited in the inner lining of the alveoli, that is in the alveolar epithelium. It gets occupied, it fills that alveolar epithelium. Okay, it covers the alveolar epithelium. Now, if we talk about this much alveolar epithelium, earlier when the person was not smoking, so the entire surface was available for the exchange of gases. So the person's lungs were in a healthy condition, but now due to tobacco smoking, what has happened? The part of the alveolar epithelium is choked or blocked by the tobacco, and or the substance produced by tobacco, and as a result of which the surface area available for the exchange of gases has reduced. The area available for exchange of gases is less now, and as a result of which the person faces difficulty in breathing. And the next type of, or the last type of obstructive respiratory disorder is hypoxia. Hypoxia is what? Oxygen deficiency in the tissues. Okay, when there is oxygen deficiency, now this condition arises when a person stays in an area where there is too much of pollution and a lot of carbon monoxide has got in, and as I already told that carbon monoxide has more affinity to hemoglobin rather than oxygen. So if carbon monoxide is available, so most of our hemoglobin will be attached with carbon monoxide and they'll form carboxyhemoglobin. And so as a result of which, what will happen, the hemoglobin available for attaching with oxygen will be less, because most of the hemoglobin has attached with carbon monoxide to form carboxyhemoglobin. So the hemoglobin available for attaching with oxygen is quite less. So since there is less of hemoglobin available for forming oxyhemoglobin, for the transport of hemoglobin, so ultimately there will be oxygen deficiency in our body, in the tissues, and that condition is known as hypoxia, which will again cause severe respiratory problem. So with this we have finished with our respiratory disorders. Now in our next topic we will be studying about certain interesting facts about our respiratory system. Not only ours, about the respiratory system of various animals as well as human beings. We'll get to know about certain interesting facts.